Backhands it up, the Penguins will change it. If they're able to come out relatively easy, here's Keith Primo with the first. Primo cuts the inside, scores! There it is! Keith Primo! The much maligned center of the Philadelphia Flyers wins this game in the fifth overtime.
SportsNetwork.com presents the O&B Puckcast. And we have a special show for you. Chef and Dan will be back on our next show, but this is just myself, Isaiah, one-on-one with a goaltending authority, Kevin Woodley. It's a really special look at not just Carter Hart and what he's doing, but also it's a really in-depth look at the position and the kind of inside hockey internationally and within the NHL and how things are evolving. Kevin is a boundless mind in motion, just someone who has endless passion for the position and wanting to be on top of what the latest technology is. And as you will hear, Kevin brings that passion to the interview. And for Flyers fans with the O&B Puckcast, you will get a palpable sense of just how advanced Carter Hart is and how you should feel really good about the Flyers' future and goal. We talk about a lot of subjects, but I can only go on so much. So without any further ado, let's bring you the interview that I conducted Wednesday night with Kevin, and I hope you'll enjoy it. Hey, everybody, it's Isaiah. We have a special interview tonight. We're here with Kevin Woodley, who covers the Vancouver Canucks for NHL.com. And of course, he's been with the AP, USA Today, and Hockey News in the past. And of course, he's with InGoalMagazine.com. And a goaltender himself. Kevin, thanks for joining the O&B Puckcast.
Yeah, hey, my pleasure. I don't know about the goaltender myself part, though. I think my beer league team after last night's performance might beg to differ. Some reasonable facsimile, but not the real thing some night.
Well, you're often on the SiriusXM NHL channel, and you have, like I said, referred to InGoalMagazine.com. But maybe you could give us a little background about your career off the ice and on the ice, so people could familiarize themselves with what you bring in terms of goaltending expertise.
Yeah, sure. I've been covering the NHL and the Canucks in particular for close to 20 years now. This is like year 18 or 19. Just say I've been around long enough that my first training camp was Sedin's first training camp in Stockholm, Sweden. So been at that part for a while, but to be honest, the goaltending didn't really start until 4 or 5 years later. The goalie coach in Vancouver at the time, and ironically again, was a gentleman named Ian Clark, who was in Columbus for a long stretch in between the two stops in Vancouver, and he's probably lesser known to the general public, but he's up there with the Allairs and the Corns of the world in terms of, he'd be on that list for me of goalie coaches that should be in the Hall of Fame at some point. He's a guy who has just written copious amounts of material on the position, and that's how I got started, actually. He asked me to edit his magazine. At the time, it was called Goalie News. And for anyone who'd ever read his writing, ironically, a couple of Canucks prospects, Thatcher Demko and Mike DiPietro, both read it when they were kids, and they kind of agreed. If you read his stuff, what I loved about it and what the goalies in Vancouver and Columbus before that loved about him as a coach is he didn't just tell you to do it, he explained why. And so sometimes it took a little work to read through some of it. It was lengthy.
Right.
But when you got to the end of it, you understood the foundation, the reasons, the why you were going to do something this way as a goaltender. And sort of that minutia, I guess, a little bit fascinated me. And it allowed me to start going into conversations with other goaltenders in the NHL from a completely different side of things. There were things I was learning from him that were being taught to 12-year-olds at the time in goalie schools, in new modern goalie schools, but NHL goalies hadn't adopted yet. Like, we really were on the front edge of this sort of evolution of the technical game of goaltending. And he was right there. And so it changed everything for me. It allowed me to have conversations with goalies and speak their language. I can't tell you the number of times I was told that a goalie doesn't really want to talk or didn't speak English, but go ahead, give it a try. And I think Bobrovsky is actually one of my favorite, where similar type introduction. He doesn't speak English. He probably won't say much, but you can try. And the next thing you know, we're literally sitting up, nose to nose kind of thing on the carpet in the locker room, sort of speaking the language of goaltending through sort of, mimicking motions and butterfly and body mechanics and things like that, and trying to work our way through the language barrier, through the language of goaltending. So it was fascinating. It immediately led me to want to play the position that I had learned so much about. And I've been playing it now for, I guess, 12, 13 years. Not at a real high level, but love it. And through some of that technical background and foundation, I've been able to play, have a weekly game that's, guys that played pro and shooters that played pro. And I am definitely not the best guy out there, but I'm not getting killed either. So I take pride in that. I love it. I love everything about the position.
That's fantastic. And the other thing that comes to mind or comes to light is how much you've interacted with some of the highest level people, probably internationally, not just in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, no, and I mean, that's been the beauty of it. It's opened, like I said, it's opened doors for me to conversations that I wasn't having before. Frankly, there are more people trying to have those conversations now in 2019, but when I started, nobody was looking at it that way. I mean, we judged goalies good goal, bad goal, save percentage, goals against average. Nobody really tried to understand what they were trying to do. Like, hey, why did that puck go in? Like, how are you approaching that? Why are you playing it this way? And so being the guy that was asking those questions, most of them, not all, because they don't all appreciate that level of sort of poking and prodding about their games. And sometimes when they're making changes in them, and they don't all love it. But a lot of them appreciate the fact you're trying to understand it and not just judge them, but really dig into what they're trying to do out there. And it's opened so many doors to so many conversations. On a regular basis, you can call up, some of the bigger names in goalie coaching and just talk, just catch up, just talk about the game. And internationally, it's allowed me to have conversations about the position with people all over the world who are, instrumental and influential in their respective countries when it comes to playing the position. And the beauty of it, like what I love the most about it is we're 20, like I said, 20 years into the league, probably 15 into goaltending at this level. And there's still or I shouldn't say no, but there's very few absolutes still. Like, there's very rarely only one way to play this position. It's constantly evolving. The way teams attack it is constantly changing, and goalies have to react to that. And so I feel like there's always growth, always something new to learn about, and then try to explain and write about, whether it's to a more general audience like NHL.com or digging into some of that minutia a little deeper for other goalies that want to hear about it, whether it's through ingoalmag.com, through our social media channels with InGoal Magazine, or through the new podcast we launched ourselves, talking to goalies from around the league. And yeah, as you can tell, I ramble about it because I'm passionate about it. It's been a real fun adventure.
That's terrific. And it's so timely because here we are in Philadelphia, the goalie graveyard of the NHL. But we are excited anew because there's this gentleman that you have actually gotten to know from Hockey Canada camps, one Carter Hart, who's come in with a 922 save percentage. Sorry to distill his performance because we know it's just by your comments that it's much more than that. But I just wanted to get your impressions when you interacted with Carter. What was your feeling about him, and what did you guys have a chance to talk about?
Yeah, and to be upfront, it's only the one Hockey Canada camp that I worked at as a video coach consultant 2 years ago, the Program of Excellence camp leading into his World Junior gold medal year in the summer. So got to be part of the team on the ice that was, gathering and then breaking down all the video for the goalies, including Carter. And then I've interacted him a little bit since then when he was in the WHL and at other events. And quite familiar with the coaches he works with as well. Obviously, have had a chance with John Stevenson, of course, is the mental coach that a lot of people know about already, that Carter's worked with since, I think, preteen, and a guy that I've known since, sort of being introduced to what he does by Braden Holtby years ago.
Right.
And other guys too. I mean, the two that I probably know the best and work the closest with are that have had a big influence on Carter. And this is the part of his game that, I honestly don't think is understood completely at the NHL level by everybody is sort of this new way of, for lack of a better term, puck tracking. A lot of people think it's just looking at the puck, but it's how you look at the puck and how that dictates how you initiate movements and how you initiate save reactions based on how you look at the puck, based on how your head moves. And I've worked a fair bit on that with the two of the goalie coaches that I know Carter's worked with, Dusty Schwartz, who's the Edmonton Oilers goalie coach, and Lyle Mast, who's a private consultant that he's worked a little more closely with in these past couple of summers, starting with Hockey Canada and then, in the summers as well. And, these are kind of all part of the team that kind of help Carter Hart get to this level, or will help him maintain at this level. But at the end of the day, as all good coaches will tell you, it's all him. But the way he's embraced new things, new ideas, things that give him an advantage, whether it's between the ears or between the pipes, is, I don't want to say it's like I love goalies that are always looking to get better and always looking for more. And I think a lot of people go, well, come on, if you're in the NHL, you're always looking for that. And it's not always true, right? Like the Roberto Luongos, the Pekka Rinnes, like they're always looking for new things. There's a reason they last as long as they do. Not all goalies are that way. They can get, confident or complacent in early success. It happens a lot. And I don't see Carter as that guy. Like, he's built this foundation. I think he'll stick with it, and I think it'll be a big part of the success he's had now and the success he'll have moving forward, because it really is ahead of the curve. But he's not a guy that I ever see resting on his laurels, and I find that those are the types of people, not just goaltenders, that tend to last a long time in this league.
Yeah. I mean, it just seems like since the lockout, because I've been following the league since '69. I'm an old head. It just seems like the adaptive process and the evolution of the game has been exponential. And if you're not one of those players that takes that attitude, especially in goal, the way they're constantly finding different ways to attack and different shooting angles, like Austin Matthews with his wrist shot, and just as an example, you're going to get left behind. It's that kind of league, it seems like.
Yeah, no, and I would say the one thing that, I've had agreement from this on some around the league, but not all. But, as a goaltender, like quite often in the past, goalies would say, like, if you're not reacting before it's off the blade of the stick, you're too late. That you have to, your ability to read where that's going before it's coming at you is a big part of this game. And that's certainly, like, I believe that I'm not questioning it in any way. But I think what we're seeing evolve is the ability to stay, the way you react to it, the way you track it biomechanically, in terms of starting from your stance and your setup, and then how you initiate that movement to the ice, how you go to the ice in a controlled manner versus just pushing with your knees and opening everything up above and letting that puck get underneath your vision. These are the things that are changing, and our understanding of them is improving significantly. And the guys that rely, like, everything in goaltending to me is a sliding scale. Whether it's athleticism versus blocking. Like, not that there's really any blockers left in the game, but that's a sliding scale. Aggressiveness versus, like, these are all, and to me, goalies that read plays versus goalies that track plays, that's another sliding scale. And as these shooters, and I've seen them because I've worked at camps, a lot of the ones, it's no coincidence that Darryl Belfry, who's leading this charge in terms of these young shooters with dynamic releases, is a former goaltender, in my opinion.
Right.
I see a lot of these guys that I go to camps in the summer with NHL goalies, and I see these shooters, and they're going to school on the goaltenders. The deception that they're building into their release is in large part based on the way goaltenders have typically moved. And they recognize how to open these guys up, how to get them moving one way, show them one thing, and deliver another. And so to me, if you understand the mechanics of how to stay on that puck through the release longer, even accepting the fact that if you wait till it's off the stick before you move, you're probably too late in a lot of situations. Staying on it longer is going to allow you to react later than other guys. And I think it's the ones that are over-reliant on reads that are going to get burned more often by this new generation of shooters who are counting on them, for lack of a better term, going early in their save reaction based on what they think is coming. Those are the ones that are going to be more exploited by this new wave of dynamic offensive shooters and forwards that have developed the ability to open them up, that understand how to create holes and get them moving in a certain direction and then send it in the other.
Right. Yeah, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about all the goals that were scored against the Flyers when Brian Elliott was not in net, and it's coming to life right in front of me. All these replays as the Flyers were hemorrhaging goals. A lot of it was structure and all that, but I have
never
to,
exists in a vacuum. And the one thing
right.
I'll tell you what, when you go look at those goals, this is the one thing that people, I think for the most part, they're starting to accept. But I think people used to look at me cross-eyed when I said this before, and it was this coach that opened me up to this. The amount of pucks that go in because the goalie moved out of the way, if you really break it down, especially up until the last sort of year and a bit, as sort of the tracking and the importance of it is kind of improved and their understanding of it has increased throughout the league. Quite literally, if you were to take a frame by frame as a shot is released, the number of goals I can find where when the shot is released, the goalie is actually in the spot taking up the net where the puck ends up going in, and by the time the puck gets there, either through dropping to the ice or the way he dropped to the ice, has opened up that spot where it goes in, essentially moving out of the way, it would shock a lot of people.
Oh, wow. That's, I'm a part-time drummer. And when you describe this frame by frame thing, there's something in drumming called the Moeller technique, where it's like a chain. It's like a perpetual motion thing. This is how most of the really fast drummers are able to roll at the speed that they do. But if you broke it down frame by frame, it would just amaze you at what positions they actually move their arm in. And it seems to be some kind of parallel, between that and what the goalies are doing. But of course, with the goaltending, you're talking about your whole body and coordinating what everybody else is doing around you. So it's that much more complicated.
Yeah, it really is. In some ways it's simple, in some ways it's complicated. Like I said, there's some people that have sort of unlocked the biomechanical trigger to getting to the ice in one piece versus opening up as you get to the ice. And there's some different thoughts on it. There's some people that don't understand it that are quite dismissive of it. I should probably be careful what I say, because when I first wrote about it, and admittedly probably a little excited to share it with the world and use some quotes that were pretty strong from some people, I got kicked in the nuts pretty hard, for lack of a better term. First one through the wall gets bloodied, as they say. But a lot of the people who in the beginning, some of the biggest names that were naysayers of it, now use it in their everyday coaching at the NHL level. And, these are guys who are going to be in the Hall of Fame themselves. So I do believe it's been validated, if also misunderstood throughout. And I do see it in Carter's game, and I know it's something that he works on. And to me, These all bode very well for Philadelphia Flyers fans as you watch this guy evolve and you watch him sort of figure out that, hey, this is going to work at the next level, and that it is going to work in the NHL, and that I can stick with this and trust this, and that maybe it doesn't look like everything else. At times, the calmness that people praise him for could be misinterpreted if he were to get behind on a play, or what appears to be behind in some old school minds as too slow. But it's not. He understands the way he moves allows him to establish angle early in his movements, arrive set, square, and with access to the puck and sight lines on it earlier than other guys who look a lot busier, look like they're moving faster. But they're not arriving set, square, on angle with that access, with that sort of set posture that allows him to go to the ice in a way that allows him to see the puck longer. All these fundamental building blocks that he's added to his game over the past 3 years, the fact he's having early success with them, and then adding the experience, to me, that's a foundation that's, I don't see going away anytime soon. And yeah, there's probably going to be highs and lows. There's going to be ups and downs. There will be other things in his life and in his game that might not continue to serve him as well as he moves on. But I do believe in this as a foundational piece, and it's a foundational piece that Carter's ahead of a lot of other goalies in the NHL on.
Yeah, well, Kevin, that begs the question, and that is the big question in Philadelphia right now. Can Carter Hart do his career and the Philadelphia Flyers justice by staying in the NHL and going through his development with a strong partner, a strong 1B goalie at the NHL level? Or like what should the development curve look like based on what we've seen so far? Can we even ask that question?
It's such a tough one because, just as I said early on, there's so few absolutes in the position. I often get questions that want an absolute answer, right? Like, is Carter Hart ready for the NHL for now and forever? Please hold your peace, whatever. Like, he's here and this is it.
Right.
There's going to be ups and downs. There always is, right? The game changes. The game evolves. Is what working now for every goalie going to work, a year from now? I don't have those answers. But as far as his development, I said this going into the season, like the confidence he has in his game. The one thing that I kind of found a little laughable, like, don't get me wrong, experience is a great thing. And getting more of it, if playing in the American Hockey League early was where he was going to get the most experience, then so be it. But I do kind of chuckle when people talk about worrying about breaking him mentally. I guess it could happen. It would be naive of me to think it's not possible. But when you talk to him and the inner confidence he has, both in himself, the work he does, the preparation he does, when you know the history with John Stevenson, it's the last thing I worry about with Carter Hart is the mental side of the game. If the Flyers, and I don't know where they're at. Sometimes when I read things, I'm not sure they know where they're at in terms of, the evolutionary scale as a team, rebuilding, caught in between. Do they move assets at the deadline and turn into a tire fire in front of their own end that would break a lot of goaltenders? Maybe that becomes an environment that isn't positive for him. But short of that, to me right now, he's where he needs to be. And the fact he's having success there just further reinforces that. Like, allow him, through the ups and downs that will come, to continue to build on the experience at this level and continue to develop the trust that everything he's doing will work at this level. And sometimes that's going to mean not when things don't go right, because it is a position where you can do everything right and the puck still goes in.
Right.
How many times you hear goalies talk about, I'm playing well, and the puck just keeps going in. And the hardest thing as a professional goaltender is to not abandon everything that you should know or you should believe in by now is your foundation. And so going through that, even through some downtimes and not abandoning it, that'll be part of the learning curve for Carter Hart at some point. But why not have it happen here? Like at some point, and I argue this with other teams and other goaltenders, and we've seen this trend towards getting guys into the NHL earlier I did a story I read a weekly column for NHL.com called Unmasked, and the topic a couple of weeks ago was about how, some of these young goalies may actually be better suited to this game. Like, how many times have we heard the veterans talk about having to adjust to this new NHL with more open looks and more scoring chances and more dynamic offensive players? And then I talked to guys like Thatcher Demko, who in his first year at Boston College, in practice every day faced a line that included Kevin Hayes and Johnny Gaudreau. Like, these guys grew up. These aren't just their peers growing up. They grew up seeing more of this style of game, more of these style of releases than a lot of older veteran goaltenders. So in some ways, they may be more prepared for aspects of this new NHL than some of the older guys. And I also am a believer that as much as experience in the AHL is not necessarily a bad thing, are you trying to build an American League goalie, or are you trying to build an NHL goalie? The games are different. In some ways, playing overseas can be better at a pro level than playing in the American League, because the AHL still has an element of scramble and rodeo to it. Maybe not the rodeo so much, they've cleaned it up, but it's a game of mistakes down there, way more so than the NHL. And so Carter's game, especially the control with which he plays, I think playing in that controlled environment and learning that, hey, I can trust how I play an open release against these guys, and learning tendencies of some of the higher level guys and going up against some of the top ranked power plays and doing the work with Kim Dillabaugh, who, by the way, is one of the best. And man, has he had a hell of a year, because, quietly, I don't know how much has been written there, but I've talked to goalie coaches around the league over the years when they go through years where guys are just like in the spin cycle of IR and out of IR. And it is tough on the goalie coach, because you're trying to manage the guys' games who are in. You're trying to build up the confidence of guys who maybe are struggling to come back from injury. And then you've got guys on before practice, then you got guys on after practice trying to learn to come back. Like, man, kudos, hat tip to Kim Dillabaugh for the job he's done throughout all this over the past couple of years, and especially this season. But why not have Carter with him at his side go through this? Let's build that routine. How do we handle the pre-scout? How do we go through our film after the game to get better for the next one? Why not learn all that at the NHL level? I don't see a downside. Maybe if he had an .850 save percentage, he was being exposed, I'd have a different answer. But that's not happening. And even if it happens for a short stretch, I don't think you panic if you're the Flyers and say, we got to send him back down to the minors. He's got to play against, got to get experience down there. It's just not how I see the best development curve for Carter Hart. There's a kid who's talked about being ready for this for a while, and I think he's showing you right now he is.
That is so exciting to hear. One of the things we heard in interviews with coaches like Dillabaugh and Brady Robinson, who I believe is a developmental coach for them.
Yeah, and Brady's a guy that I go way back with here in. He's from the Vancouver area originally, and when I talked about Ian Clark as one of those guys that should be in the Hall of Fame, Brady was one of his, for the longest time, was sort of his number two, not with an NHL team, but in the private organization he ran called GDI, the Goaltending Development Institute. So Brady is one of many, and we hear a lot about the children of the corn, but Brady is one of many sort of Ian Clark disciples, as is Kim Dillabaugh around the league. So they come from a sort of similar background to how I learned the position, and they're excellent.
That's another thing that's encouraging to hear, because I'll tell you right now, I know we talked about, we're not really going to get into the different prospects that the Flyers have, but overseas, a lot of these guys are doing very well. And knowing that we're going to have these coaches with these methods, which seem to be more in step with what's happening right now, is very exciting. I guess the other thing, Kevin, is now that it looks like you asked earlier, you weren't sure about what the Flyers, what they're thinking. Listening to Chuck Fletcher, I think it was just yesterday, it sounds like they're going to give Carter Hart every chance to, take this job and run with it a little while. And if they're out of the playoffs, they do want him to get a playoff series, experience with the Phantoms.
Right, that makes sense. I mean, again, more experience, that you're not that you can't get in the NHL.
Right, especially if the team's not going to make it.
Exactly.
But, one thing Brady Robinson said, getting back to that, is one area Carter has really improved in it is what he calls competing outside of structure. And that reminds me of the early years of Carey Price, who, of course, Carter's often compared to. And you were talking about earlier about sometimes these guys look kind of slow. And I think that he was wrestling, and maybe Carter, maybe before he even got here, might have wrestled with those issues. And it seems like he's resolved a lot of that.
Yeah, and just make sure I understand it. I mean, the appearing slow versus being slow, like recognizing that establishing early angle from the top down versus these guys who move their feet a whole bunch but really aren't gaining angle, aren't gaining ice, aren't gaining anything. They're just moving for the sake of moving, and right up to the NHL, goalie coaches go, "Ooh, he looks fast," versus a guy who builds that movement from the top down, and he doesn't start by moving his feet, so it doesn't look as quick, but he's actually building all the elements we want when he arrives early, and so when he gets there, he has them all. There's a difference between that and looking slow versus the compete, and that's, to me, compete a lot of the times is post-save, scramble, secondary, in a controlled environment. Like, we kind of wrestle with this with Mike DiPietro in Vancouver when he was drafted. I mean, nobody competes. He was actually at that same camp with Carter with Hockey Canada, and some of the saves that this kid made, it was unreal. Like, he is as competitive as they come, and he will go outside the box and throw every limb and do everything he can, and he never stops. And that's great. Those are all skills you want. And yes, sometimes guys with a lot of structure can get a little too locked into it, and then if the play pulls them outside of that structure, they don't scramble, they don't battle, they don't compete. They kind of get locked into it a little too much. It's a fine line between those two things, and it's important that the person in charge of encouraging the latter as much as you need it. Like with DiPietro, that's great you have that, and that's going to serve you well. But if you're going to it early in a sequence, rather than the controlled element, and then only go to it, when you really, really need it, on maybe the third save instead of the second one, or the fourth instead of the third, like that's positive. And those are steps he's made in his game that are positive. He still has that ability, but he's not reliant on it. And as long as you can recognize the difference between the two, then yeah, by all means, for sure, encourage, more, because you're not gonna be able. It's not a game of perfect for goaltenders. If it was, some of these kids, there's a lot of kids. They seem like 12, 13 years old. Like they look better than NHL goalies in the way they move. They can't stop a puck when the game starts. And Carter's obviously not that. But I get where they're coming from in terms of both sides of that equation, and making sure that you don't get too rigid in your structure, and you have to go outside it every once in a while. But again, fine line between going outside of it in desperation times and going outside of it prematurely and putting yourself in desperation times when maybe you don't need to be there.
Right. No, that definitely makes sense. So is there if Carter is ready and should be counted on to be a number one goalie, is there a limit on the number of games because he's 20 years old, or should he be treated like a 25-year-old? Like how do teams calibrate these decisions? And of course it affects what kind of backup you're going to have going into next year.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, right? Like saying Carter's ready for the NHL and saying he's ready to be a number one, like, backbone guy. Like, again, I got to be careful. I'm obviously a big fan of the kid, but I got to be careful not to put the, sort of the cart before the horse, so to speak, right? These are all steps and processes. And as far as what that looks like in terms of games, as much as I know the team wants to be able to plan and say, hey, this is how we're going to be this year, and this is our ideal year. It rarely goes that way. And the reality of games played is, there will be an adjustment for him because the NHL is a grind. It's more travel. Yeah, it's first class and the hotels are nice and you drive right up to the plane and, the bus is waiting at the plane when you get there. It's not like you and I traveling.
Right.
But it still takes there's a lot of wear and tear there. We're seeing it here with Elias Peterson, with the Canucks. there's a process to adjusting to that. And so maybe you monitor those starts and limit them a little more because of that, just a little more cautious with it. But for the most part, I think this is something teams are still trying to figure it out. I would say your ideal window for him is probably no different than it is for any goalie. It's 55-ish. There's the simple reality is there has been one goaltender to win a Stanley Cup. And I know we're not talking about Stanley Cups in Philadelphia yet, but there has been one goaltender, one, to win a Stanley Cup playing more than 60 games in a season since 2003. I had it for a story I did recently. I think 15
Marty
years.
Brodeur, yeah.
Yeah, he was the last one. And so 03. So 15 years. So, and for a lot of those years, I know it's backed off recently, but for a lot of those years, goalies were playing good goalies on good teams with decent backup options were playing upwards of 65, 70 games, despite, this pretty obvious glaring, there's obviously a correlation between the two, and yet teams still are reluctant to accept it. So, if he shows he can handle it, then you play him in that range like you would a number one guy. I would expect there might be more ups and downs. There might be more hiccups along the way where you're going to need to pull him back. This is the thing. There's a couple things about the way the game is going for goaltenders. One, you can't get away with anything short of your A game. That's been a consensus talking to goalies and goalie coaches around the league. Used to be you could have an off night, just be in position, pucks would hit you, you get away with it. That's just not the league anymore. Those are the nights where you end up with a 5 or a 7 on the clock. And that's a change. And so needing to be that sharp, that focused, that dialed in on a night-to-night basis takes a toll mentally in terms of the fatigue. And that's why I think you're seeing, teams cut back on the number of starts. I think you take a page from the Vancouver Canucks. And again, I say that because I know Dillabaugh and Robinson are disciples of Ian Clark, and Ian Clark's leading the charge here. And Jacob Markstrom is having, the numbers aren't great overall yet, but he's having a really good season despite one down month. He's really made strides here, and yet there were times when he was in the midst of some of his best hockey of his entire career, an 8 or 9 game stretch where he's playing lights out, that Ian Clark would not pull him, but give, at the time, Anders Nilsson a start because he could see some of the details that they were trying to work on in his game were slipping. Right. So don't wait till they've fallen apart before you pull him out, and now you got to take a week to reset him. They would pull him out, give him a day off, allow him to work with the goalie coach. And I think you take the same kind of approach. If he looks like he's playing without a problem, you don't see signs in his game of things that are going to need correction with time, nothing's being exploited, then you run him out there. But if you see those signs, then you do the same thing. You make sure you have a guy that you feel comfortable the team can win with as well, the team has confidence in, and you give him his shot, not just for the sake of playing him, but because in today's NHL, you need to play them both in order to get the most out of your number one. You don't keep running a guy out there at 80% and accept 80% for 4 games when you can give him one of those 4 games off and get 100% out of him in the other 3. That's just, to me, that's not just smart math, that's smart goalie coaching. And increasingly, I think head coaches are listening to their goalie coaches on these things. I know it's happened here in Vancouver, and the Canucks are better for it. Even when Nielsen hadn't won a game in a couple of months, there was no point in not playing him so you would get less out of Markstrom for 3 straight games when you could sit Markstrom for 1 and get him at 100% for the next 2.
Right. It definitely makes sense. Markstrom's a great story. He was really ballyhooed coming out. What was it, 08 draft? And I call him pretty much a successful reclamation project. And of course, you have Thatcher Demko behind him, and it looks like goaltending in Vancouver is in really good shape.
Yeah, but here's the thing, right? With Markstrom, it was a long process. For how long was Jacob called the best goaltender not in the NHL? And a lot of the things that he had success with at other levels just weren't, some of them, it was obvious early on, weren't going to translate. He was way too aggressive for a goaltender of his size. The way he moved, he did, frankly, with and I can say this, it's easier to say this now, It didn't make a lot of sense to people when I used to say it, but it's easier to say this now because the goalie coach has clearly agreed and made changes to mitigate it. He didn't watch the puck. He didn't track the puck at all. He opened and closed on movements, and for a big body, he made, the bigger the goalie, the bigger the holes when you make them move, and he made them bigger than they needed to be even for a guy his size. There were just a lot of holes in his game, and I give him credit. You're told for so long that you're the best not in the NHL. You're told how good you are. I think it's easy to be resistant to change. But since he's gotten here through a number of different voices, Rolly Melanson backed him up in his positioning, neutralized him. Dan Cloutier improved some of those tracking mechanics through recovery. And now Ian Clark has come in, and much like he did with Bobrovsky in Columbus, he's changed his stance. He's narrowed up his feet. He's freed up his movement. He's allowed him to stay over top of the puck and ahead of the play with that movement. Again, just strictly on sort of some of the biomechanics of stance. And Jacobs embraced all those changes. And, it's interesting, kind of stands in some ways. You could say, well, look at like Markstrom, look at Steve Mason in the rookie year he had, look at Markstrom and how highly touted he was. And now he's almost 30 before he's been able to put it all together. And you could look at that and say, well, this should serve as a warning that Carter Hart's not a sure thing. And yeah, you could look at it that way, or you could look at it how I did, actually examine their games. The saves that Steve Mason was making during that rookie season, they were incredible. But a lot of them were reactive scramble saves. This kind of stuff, we talk about that fine line between needing to go into desperation and putting yourself in desperation prematurely. Like Mason had a great year. But if you're relying on those types of saves too often, to me, that's not repeatable. I could watch Markstrom's game in the AHL and say, wow, like he's got to close these holes or there's going to be problems. I don't see those same holes in Carter Hart's game. I don't see that reliance or an over-reliance, I should say, on scramble saves. Again, doesn't mean it's always going to be perfect. There's probably going to be some hiccups along the way. But I look for how he plays as much as the performance and the numbers he generates in terms of what I want to see looking forward when I'm judging a guy. It's like when we watched the Hamburglar in Ottawa.
Right.
Incredible run. And he's got a ton of skill, but the number of times during those sequences where he got behind on a play, I didn't want to write it, but when I was asked to write it, like what are the odds of this being long lasting? And I give him credit because he's gone to work to fix some of those things. And he really has run into, concussion and hip injuries. Like he hasn't had a good time of it physically since then. But that level, well, it's unsustainable for anyone. But when you really broke down the game, you could see why maybe it wasn't going to last versus just trying to project based on what other people have done. No, watch his game, break down his game, and then do your best job of trying to judge how he's going to be moving forward.
Right. It's more qualitative and checking off those boxes than worrying about what a particular number is, because the numbers are going to work out if the process is where it needs to be.
Right, or what the history says. And all that said, hey man, like I should be careful when I say all that, because if I could really project that way with any type of absolute certainty in a position with so few absolutes, we're probably not talking. I've probably got 10 teams on speed dial offering me lots of money right now. So, clearly yeah. I shouldn't pretend like I know better than anyone else, because this is a position that's constantly changing, and even the best have to change with it, or you can get caught off guard making big, bold statements, as I just spent the past few minutes doing, that don't come true.
No, well, I mean, it sounds like as long as you're open, and I'd say it's a general statement, if you're open and your curiosity is always there, that you're willing to shift when a better mousetrap comes along, then you're always going to be ahead of it. Like you were referring to in the very beginning to Luongo and goalies like that.
Yeah, and that's why I love those guys, because they're always, sometimes you can tinker too much, right? Sometimes you can get fascinated with changing and change for the sake of change. But to me, that's a lot better than the alternative, which is being stuck in your ways. And for a game that evolves so quickly and goaltenders have so little control over what they see, an unwillingness to change to me is a lot more dangerous than a guy who's willing to try a lot of different things. Right.
Well, Kevin, it's really been great talking with you. It's so great that you were able to come on, and I feel a lot better speaking with you about Carter Hart's chances to to make it this year. And I'd still feel better if they had a veteran backup. There's a lot of talk in town about Anthony Stolarz having a nice 10 or 15 game run and going with those two guys. That makes me a little nervous, but all that aside.
Yeah, no, and hey, listen, I'll be honest with you. I don't have an answer there. Like, I don't have the right answer there. You look at the Jets 2 years ago with Hellebuck and Hutchinson, right? Like, sometimes you need to have that experience factor, whether it's in the room or just that voice. And yet, even with those, even then, like I know the changes that Connor, because I've been on the ice and got a chance to see them in the summer. Like, I know the changes he made in his game. So, I judge him now on how he is now versus what he was then. The way he trains, the way he moves into pucks, all based on how he changed his off ice and off season, the way he trained his body. Like, it's tough. Like, that's the thing. Like, I can see all these things between the pipes. I can't see between the ears. And there may be value in a veteran presence to help him between the ears, to be a sounding board, to be a support mechanism, to help with this transition to being a full-time number one. But again, I say that, and yet the last thing I said we should worry about is Carter Hart between the ears. So at the end of the day, I don't know that I have an answer on that one. I think experience never hurts to have, but above all else, you need to be able to play. Like, if you got an experienced guy, but you feel like you can't play him and you got to run the kid into the ground, that's the worst thing. So if the answer is a young kid who can play with him and push him, and that's good, that may be a better answer. Like I said, I really don't know. That's why people who make a lot more money than me have to make those decisions.
Well, it sounds like Kim Delavaugh and with Brady Robinson, at least we're in some good hands. Acolytes of it was Ian Clark.
Yep. Yeah. A couple of longtime guys that worked with my. I shouldn't call them disciples, but I think they would understand that I say that with as a term of endearment.
Oh, absolutely. So, Kevin, you cover the Canucks for NHL.com, and are there people want to go to ingoalmagazine.com and check out your content there? Is there any thing that's on promotion right now, or anything that you want to tell us about?
I would say so. Canucks, not Canucks. NHL.com is the regular gig, and I do have a weekly goalie column that comes out there called Unmasked that my bosses at NHL have been really great about letting me build out and develop and try and look at some of the different aspects of playing goal in a little broader terms. It's ingoalmag.com for InGoal Magazine, or just search InGoal Magazine. We've got a relaunch coming here in the next couple of weeks that'll have a lot of new content. Right now, there's not a ton out there. Right now, I'd say the best way to follow us would be through the various social media channels. On Twitter, InGoal Mag. Same with Instagram, and then search InGoal Magazine on iTunes. We've started a podcast ourselves, and we're 3 episodes in, and the first one was me and Roberto Luongo on a car ride. It was kind of like a Jerry Seinfeld, comedians in cars thing. And when Lou was in town, we went for a ride and fired up the microphone for that one. We've got old sort of equipment manufacturers talking about the old days of Patrick Waugh shoving 3-inch blocks in his pants, and Eddie Balfour stuffing deer hair into his pads, and all these types of things. And then the second edition was Mike McKenna, now Philadelphia Flyers own Mike McKenna, talking about the year that's been for him. And so just some fascinating stuff. We try and get into deeper, longer conversations, kind of like this one, but with the guys who actually can play the position at the higher level.
Well, that sounds really fun, and everybody should check that out. And on Twitter, people can follow you.
Kevin is in goal.
At Kevin is in goal. Kevin, thanks again for doing this, and hopefully we'll talk to you sometime down the road.
Yeah, perfect. Isaiah, hey, I really appreciate the conversation. Anyone who's willing to listen to me ramble for this long is a friend of mine, and thanks for putting up with it, and thanks for having me.
All right, great. All right. Thanks a lot. Take care now. Okay, Isaiah, back with you right before we go. I hope you enjoyed that. Kevin, it's just really no one like him as a goaltending authority right now, and he's consulted by people internationally, not just in the NHL. So really an intense guy who just has this, like I said in the intro, just a boundless passion for the position. And I hope you found that really enlightening. And just one discussion point before we call it a night. I think that based on everything, what I'm inferring is when we talk to Kevin, let's not go crazy with the 60 to 70 games. The Stanley Cup has not been won by a team that had a goaltender playing that many games since 2003, like Kevin pointed out. I think we're in the 55 game range for Carter Hart, which would behoove the Flyers to get someone who could handle 27 games, maybe 32 games, and it remains to be seen whether Anthony Stolarz can be that guy, or in my mind, it would be better to get a veteran, given that Anthony Stolarz has had a problem with the same knee for 3 years in a row. It sure would be a lot less expensive on the cap for the Flyers to bring back Stoli, and I think for most Flyer fans, we have a soft spot in our hearts for a guy who just won't quit, who's had nonstop injuries. But on the flip side, imagine Carter Hart needing that time, that downtime that Kevin referred to as part of his development. Maybe not the development the way we looked at it prior to the interview, if you've kind of been swayed by what Kevin had to say, but more about getting that 100% instead of just running him out there, working with the goalie coach. And if some other netminder is going to be out there, you're going to need him for that 27 to 30 games, 35 games maybe even. Who knows what happens? Every goaltender needs a break or gets hurt. But I think it would be better not to be stuck, because if Stolarz was hurt, that would really be a hardship. And the Flyers would be left scrambling, maybe having to make another low-value deal. I probably want to get at least a Cam Talbot here, but it remains to be seen. I only wish the best for Anthony Stolarz. But what we have to do, and what the Flyers have to do, is look at everything through the prism of, well, if Carter Hart's our guy, what's the best thing to do for his success? And if we predicate everything on that, I think we'll be okay. Just my thoughts. Anyway, a chef, Dan and myself will be back Tuesday night. There's so many games clustered together that we want to try and bring you a show in a timely fashion without competing necessarily with on game day as we record and get overtaken by the events. We'll do the best we can for you. And with that, just a reminder that the O&B Puckcast is on 5 podcast formats. We're thinking about maybe adding another one, and we'll let you know about that going forward. So it's iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, Google Podcast, and usually within about 24 to 36 hours, PhillySportsNetwork.com, our partners, have it up on their YouTube channel. It's really important, particularly with iTunes. It's a great favor to us if you would subscribe, leave a rating. That would really be appreciated. And give us some feedback, whether it's on the platform itself or at our account at O&B Puck, on Twitter at O&B Puck. And with that, everybody, take care.